Commander Sarah Chen was drinking her morning coffee when the emergency alert flashed across her screen. The bridge of the UES Perseverance went quiet as the weak signal came through their communications array. Static filled the air, broken by strange musical tones that their computers struggled to translate. "Commander, we're getting something," Lieutenant Torres said, his fingers dancing over the control panel. "It's not in any language our systems recognize, but the AI is working on it." Sarah set down her cup and walked to the main display. The signal was faint, barely strong enough to reach them across the vast emptiness of space. Whatever was sending it was very far away, and probably not very powerful. "Keep working on it," she ordered. "And send word to Captain Rivera. He'll want to know about this." 20 minutes later, the translation came through. The voice that spoke was soft, almost musical, filled with sadness that made everyone on the bridge feel uncomfortable. "This is Luminarch Aaron of the Cathera people. Our world is dying. Our oceans are disappearing. We have asked for help from the Galactic Council, but no one has answered. If anyone receives this message, please remember us. We were a peaceful people. We loved beauty and knowledge. We shared what we had with others. But now we fade away, and the stars will be a little darker without us." The message repeated 3 more times before cutting off completely. Sarah stared at the empty display, her heart heavy. She had never heard of the Cathara, but the pain in that voice was real. Captain Marcus Rivera arrived on the bridge 15 minutes later. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too much of the galaxy's cruelty. He listened to the recording twice without saying a word. "Distance and location?" he asked finally. "Sector 7 Alpha, approximately 4 months' travel. At maximum speed," Torres replied. "The signal originated from a system called Aquatica Prime." "Have you contacted the Council?" "Yes, sir. They're having an emergency session in 3 hours. Rivera nodded slowly. "Prep a shuttle. We're going to that meeting." The Galactic Council chamber was a massive sphere floating in space near the center of the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species gathered there to discuss trade, territory, and the few laws that most civilizations agreed to follow. Today, the chamber buzzed with conversation about the Cathara message. Sarah accompanied Captain Rivera as they took their seats in the human section. Humans were still relatively new to galactic politics, having joined the Council only 50 years ago. Many older species still saw them as children playing at being adults. The meeting was called to order by Prime Counselor Zeth, a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms. His species, the Valdorians, had been part of the Council for over 1,000 years. "We have all heard the transmission from the Cathara," Zeth began, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Their sun has begun producing dangerous solar flares that are slowly boiling away their ocean world. They request evacuation assistance for their population of 50 million individuals." Admiral Cross of the Zorani Empire stood up. His species looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs, and they controlled the largest military force in the galaxy. "The Zorani have reviewed this situation. The cost of evacuating 50 million beings would be enormous. What do the Cathara offer?" "In return?" "According to our records," replied Counselor Vex of the Trade Federation, "the Cathara have no significant military power, no rare resources, and no strategic value. They are aquatic beings who require very specific living conditions. Housing them would be expensive and difficult." Sarah felt her anger rising. These beings were talking about 50 million lives like they were discussing a business deal. "What about their medical knowledge?" she asked, standing up despite Rivera's warning look. "The records show they've contributed advanced healing techniques to the galactic database." Admiral Cross turned his cold reptilian eyes toward her. "Medical knowledge can be obtained in many ways, young human. The Cathara are weak, defenseless, and offer nothing we cannot get elsewhere. Sentiment is a luxury we cannot afford." Other species began to voice their agreement. The hegemony representative pointed out that their ships were needed for more important missions. The Crystalline Collective mentioned that their vessels were not designed to carry organic life forms. One by one, every major power found excuses to avoid helping. Captain Rivera stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice was calm but firm. The human fleet will undertake the evacuation. The chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, laughter began to ripple through the assembled aliens. Captain Rivera, Prime Counselor Zeth said with barely hidden amusement, "Humanity has perhaps 200 ships capable of interstellar travel, the Cathara number 50 million. Even if your entire fleet was converted to transport vessels, you could not save even 1% of their population." "We'll find a way," Rivera replied. Admiral Cross stood up again, his massive form towering over the human delegation. "This is why your species will never be truly powerful," he said with contempt. "You waste resources on the weak and helpless. You make decisions with your hearts instead of your minds. The Cathara cannot help you, cannot trade with you, cannot fight beside you. They are a dead species walking. Let them die with dignity instead of prolonging their suffering." "Every species has value," Sarah said, her voice shaking with emotion. "The Cathara have been part of this galaxy for thousands of years. They've shared their knowledge freely, hurt no one, and asked for help only when they faced extinction. If we can't help them, what does that say about all of us?" "It says we are practical," replied Counselor Vex coldly. "Resources are limited. We must use them wisely." "Then humanity will use ours unwisely," Rivera said. "We're going to Aquatica Prime." As the humans left the chamber, they could hear the other species still discussing them. Some seemed amused by human foolishness. Others expressed pity for such an emotional species. A few even placed bets on how quickly the humans would give up when they realized the true scale of the problem. Back aboard the Perseverance, Rivera called a meeting of his senior staff. "You all heard what happened in there," he began. "Every other species in the galaxy has written off the Cathara. They think we're fools for even trying." "Sir," said Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's chief medical officer, "they might be right about the numbers. 50 million beings is a lot more than our fleet can handle with normal evacuation procedures. Then we'll have to find abnormal procedures." Rivera replied, "I want every ship in the human fleet recalled to Aquatica Prime. Strip them of everything that isn't absolutely necessary. Turn every cargo bay, every spare room, every corridor into living space." "What about the other species?" asked Chief Engineer Tom Bradley. "Some of them might help if we asked nicely." Sarah shook her head. "They made their position clear. They think the Cathara are worthless." "Then they're wrong," Rivera said firmly. "And we're going to prove it. Send the recall orders. We leave." For Aquatica Prime in 48 hours. As the meeting broke up, Sarah stayed behind with the captain. "Sir, can we really save them all?" Rivera looked out at the stars through the bridge windows. "I don't know, Sarah, but we have to try. Because if we don't, who will? And if we can turn our backs on 50 million innocent beings just because it's difficult, what does that make us?" "Human," she said softly. "Exactly. And sometimes that has to be enough." The next day, human ships from across their territory began arriving at the rendezvous point. It was not an impressive fleet by galactic standards, but every captain had volunteered for the mission. They knew the odds. They knew the risks. They came anyway, because that's what humans do. The human fleet arrived at Aquatica Prime to find a world dying in slow motion. The planet that had once been covered in beautiful blue oceans now showed vast brown scars where the water had boiled away. Steam rose constantly from the remaining seas, creating thick clouds that hid most of the surface. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Torres as he stared at the main screen. "It's worse than we thought." Captain Rivera stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, watching the sensor readings flow across his displays. The planet's sun was indeed producing massive solar flares every few days, each one pumping deadly radiation and heat into the system. The Cathara had perhaps 6 months before their world became completely uninhabitable. "Take us into orbit," he ordered, "and start scanning for population centers." What they found broke their hearts. Millions of Cathara were crowded into the deepest ocean trenches. the only places still cool enough to survive. Their beautiful floating cities had been abandoned as the water levels dropped. Desperate families huddled together in underwater caves waiting for death. "Captain," Communications Officer Park called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's in the same language as the distress signal. Put it through." The voice that came over the speakers was weak but filled with wonder. "Unknown vessels. This is Luminarch Aaron of the Cathara. We did not expect anyone to come. Who are you?" Rivera picked up the communication device. "This is Captain Marcus, Rivera of the human fleet. We're here to evacuate your people." There was a long pause. When the Luminarch spoke again, his voice was shaking. "Humans? But why? We have never met your species. We have nothing to offer you." "You're in trouble," Rivera said simply. "That's enough." Dr. Elena Vasquez worked around the clock to understand Cathara biology. The aquatic aliens were even more fragile than the humans had realized. They could not survive in normal ship atmosphere. They needed water with specific mineral content, exact temperature control, and precise pressure levels. Without these conditions, they would die within hours. "Captain," she reported after 2 days of study, "we have a major problem. Each Cathara needs about 50 gallons of specially treated water just to stay alive during transport. That's 2.5 billion gallons for the entire population. Our ships can't carry that much." Chief Engineer Bradley was already working on solutions. He had teams stripping unnecessary equipment from every human vessel, converting cargo bays into massive water tanks, and installing jury-rigged life support systems that could maintain Cathara living conditions. "We can fit maybe 5,000 Cathara on the entire fleet if we pack them tight," he reported. "But it'll be dangerous. One system failure and they all die." Sarah Chen had been working with the Cathara directly, learning their language and customs through the universal translator. She found them to be gentle, intelligent beings who created incredible art with their bioluminescent skin patterns. Their cities under the sea had been things of beauty, with living coral shaped into fantastic sculptures and gardens of sea plants that glowed in the darkness. "They're not warriors," she told Rivera during one of their planning meetings. "They've never fought a war, never hurt another species. They spent their time creating beauty and studying medicine. Their entire civilization is based on helping others. And now everyone else has abandoned them," Rivera said bitterly. 50 million of the most peaceful beings in the galaxy, and we're the only ones who care." The evacuation began with the youngest and oldest Cathara first. Human crew members worked in shifts around the clock, carefully transferring the aquatic aliens into specially prepared tanks aboard their ships. Each transfer took hours, as the Cathara could not survive even brief exposure to normal atmosphere. The work was backbreaking. Human sailors who had never done manual labor found themselves hauling water tanks and checking life support systems. The ship's corridors were flooded with knee-deep water so the Cathara could move around. Everything smelled of salt and seaweed, but the hardest part was the math. Even working at maximum efficiency, the human fleet could only evacuate about 10,000 Cathara per week. At that rate, they could save maybe 500,000 before the planet became uninhabitable. 49.5 million would die. Meanwhile, other galactic species watched from a safe distance. The Zorani sent spy drones to observe the human evacuation efforts. Admiral Cross made regular reports to his superiors expressing amazement at human stubbornness. "They continue to work despite obvious failure," he told the Zorani High Command. "Their ships are breaking down from overuse. Their crew members are collapsing from exhaustion. Yet they persist in this pointless exercise. I predict they will abandon the effort within another month when reality sets in." The hegemony placed bets on exactly when the humans would give up. Some species sent merchant vessels to the edge of the system, hoping to salvage valuable equipment from human ships when the fleet inevitably broke down and was abandoned. But the humans kept working. Dr. Vasquez made daily trips to the planet's surface, studying Cathara physiology and learning their medical techniques. She was amazed by their advanced understanding of disease and healing. They had cures for conditions that still killed thousands of humans every year. "Captain," she said during one evening briefing, The Cathara have medical knowledge that could revolutionize healthcare throughout human space. They understand cellular regeneration in ways we've never imagined. They could help us cure cancer, heart disease, aging itself. Are you suggesting we save them because they're useful to us? Rivera asked sharply. No, sir, Vasquez replied quickly. I'm just saying they have so much to offer the galaxy. It's criminal that everyone else is just letting them die. Sarah spent her off-duty hours with Luminarch Aaron, learning about Cathara culture and history. The ancient alien told her stories of his people's past, their great discoveries and artistic achievements. He shared songs that had been passed down for thousands of years, melodies that could only be properly performed underwater with patterns of colored light. Your people confuse me, he admitted to her one day. Every other species we contacted asked what we could give them in return for help. You never asked. Why? Because it doesn't matter, Sarah replied. You need help. We can provide it. That's all. But surely there must be some benefit for your species? Some advantage you hope to gain? Sarah thought about it for a moment. Maybe we sleep better at night knowing we tried to do the right thing. The Luminarch's skin pattern shifted to colors that Sarah had learned indicated deep thought. Your species is very strange. In our studies of galactic civilizations, we have learned that most intelligent life forms are driven by self-interest, survival, reproduction, resource acquisition, territorial expansion. But humans seem to be motivated by concepts that provide no biological advantage. Like what? Compassion for strangers, sacrifice for abstract principles, the willingness to suffer loss in order to help others. These traits should have been eliminated by natural selection, yet they appear to be central to human identity. Maybe they make us stronger in ways that aren't obvious, Sarah suggested. Perhaps, but they also make you vulnerable. Other species will try to exploit your kindness. They will see your compassion as weakness. Sarah looked out at the dying ocean through the viewport of their underwater shuttle. Let them try. We know who we are. As the weeks passed, the situation grew more desperate. The solar flares were getting stronger and more frequent. The Cathara were being forced into deeper and deeper water as their world literally boiled around them. Human ships were breaking down from constant use, and several crew members had been hospitalized from exhaustion. But still they worked. Rivera called a meeting of all ship captains 3 months into the evacuation. The holographic conference room was filled with tired faces and grim expressions. Status report, he requested. Captain Williams of the transport ship Unity spoke first. We've saved about 400,000 so far, but we're losing ground. The flares are coming faster now and the safe zones are shrinking. We might have 2 months left before the planet is completely uninhabitable. Ship status? Rivera asked. 17 vessels have suffered major system failures, reported Captain Chen of the cargo hauler Determination. We've got them patched, up for now. But they're running on hope and spare parts. Life support systems are operating at 200% of designed capacity. We're one breakdown away from losing thousands of Cathara. Rivera nodded grimly. Options? The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Captain Torres of the research ship Discovery spoke up. Sir, we all knew this was impossible when we started. The math hasn't changed. We can't save them all. No, Rivera replied firmly. We can't save them all with normal methods, so we need to find abnormal methods. Dr. Vasquez, what have you learned about Cathara biology that might help us? The doctor's hologram flickered as she accessed her files. Well, they do have an interesting hibernation ability. In their natural cycle, they can slow their metabolism dramatically during food shortages or environmental stress. Theoretically, they could survive for months in a state similar to suspended animation. Could we use that? Rivera asked. It would be risky. We'd need to design completely new containment systems, and if anything went wrong, they might never wake up. Rivera looked around the table at his captains. Gentlemen, ladies, we chem doctor Elena Vasquez had not slept properly in 6 days. Her laboratory aboard the Perseverance looked like a battlefield, with research equipment scattered across every surface and holographic displays showing complex biological data. She was trying to solve the impossible. How to keep 50 million Cathara alive with resources meant for 500,000. The breakthrough came when she was studying the Cathara hibernation cycle. During their planet's natural winter seasons, the aquatic aliens could slow their body functions to almost nothing, surviving for months without food and with minimal water. But the process had never been attempted on such a massive scale, and certainly not in the hostile environment of a spaceship. Captain Rivera, she called over the intercom, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. I think I found something. Within minutes, Rivera and his senior staff crowded into the small lab. Sarah Chen was there too, along with Chief Engineer Bradley and several other department heads. Show us, Rivera ordered. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing a Cathara in cross-section. Look at this. During hibernation, their brain activity drops to less than 5% of normal levels. Their heart rate slows to 1 beat per minute. Most importantly, their water requirements drop by 90%. 90%? Bradley asked, his engineer's mind already calculating. That changes everything. But there's a catch, Vasquez continued. The hibernation process requires very specific conditions. Temperature must be exactly 4.2 degrees Celsius. The water must contain precise mineral levels, and the process can't be interrupted once it starts or the subject dies. Sarah studied the data flowing across the displays. How long could they stay in hibernation? Theoretically, up to a year, maybe longer. But we've never tried it with this many subjects, and we've certainly never tried to wake them up in a completely different environment. Rivera paced around the lab, his mind working through the implications. What would we need to make this work? Bradley was already pulling up engineering schematics. We'd need to build thousands of individual hibernation pods. Each one would need its own life support system, temperature control, and monitoring equipment. We're talking about stripping every ship in the fleet down to bare metal. Do it, Rivera ordered. Sir, Sarah said carefully. If this doesn't work, we could kill every Cathara we try to save. And if we don't try it, they all die anyway when their planet boils away. At least this gives them a chance. The next phase of the operation was unlike anything attempted in galactic history. Every human ship became a construction zone as crews worked to build hibernation pods from whatever materials they could find. Weapon systems were torn out to make room for life support equipment. Armor plating was repurposed into pod shells. Even personal belongings were melted down to provide raw materials. The work was dangerous and exhausting. Human crew members worked 20-hour shifts grabbing food and sleep whenever they could. Several people collapsed from exhaustion and had to be revived with stimulants. Others were injured when hastily constructed equipment failed or exploded. But, slowly, the pods took shape. Meanwhile, Sarah worked with Luminarch Aaron to explain the plan to the Cathara population. The ancient alien's bioluminescent patterns showed deep concern as he listened to the translation. You are asking our people to trust their lives to an untested process, he said through the universal translator. Many may choose death over such uncertainty. I understand, Sarah replied. But it's the only way we can save everyone. Your planet has maybe 6 weeks left before the last safe zones disappear. The Luminarch's patterns shifted to what Sarah had learned indicated serious thought. Your species continues to confuse me. You are risking everything on a plan that may not work, spending resources you cannot afford, all to save people you barely know. That's what friends do, Sarah said simply. Friends? But we have only just met. Friendship doesn't require time. It requires trust and caring. We care about your people. Over the next 3 weeks, human engineers performed miracles of improvisation. Chief Bradley designed pod systems that could operate independently for months, powered by fusion cells salvaged from ship engines. Dr. Vasquez developed hibernation protocols that could be administered by automated systems, since there wouldn't be enough human crew to monitor each pod individually. The other galactic species watched with growing amazement and contempt. Admiral Cross of the Zorani sent regular reports to his superiors. The humans have now sacrificed their entire fleet's combat capability, he reported. Their ships are defenseless, overloaded and barely functional. They are attempting some form of mass suspended animation for the Cathara, but our scientists calculate only a 30% chance of success. They are throwing away their military strength for beings who cannot help them in return. The hegemony increased their bets on human failure. Surely they will give up soon, their trade representatives told each other. No species is foolish enough to destroy themselves for strangers. But some individuals were beginning to have doubts. Captain Zara of the independent trader Stellar Wind had been watching the human operation from the edge of the system. She was not bound by government policies, and the sight of humans literally tearing apart their ships to save aliens was starting to affect her. "First officer," she told her second in command, "set course for the human fleet." "Captain, we have orders to maintain distance. I don't take orders from governments. Set the course." When the Stellar Wind approached the human fleet, Rivera was suspicious. Too many species had tried to interfere with their mission already. "Unknown vessel, state your intentions," he signaled. "Captain Rivera, this is Captain Zara. I have medical supplies and construction materials that might be useful to your operation. Consider them a gift." Rivera was stunned. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing. Just wanted to help." It was the first assistance the humans had received from any non-human source. More importantly, it proved that not every alien in the galaxy had abandoned their conscience. The hibernation process began with the eldest and youngest Kithara first. Each alien had to be carefully prepared, their body chemistry adjusted, and then placed into the specially designed pods. The process took hours for each individual, and mistakes could be fatal. Dr. Vasquez personally oversaw the first 100 procedures, making adjustments to the protocol as she learned more about Kithara physiology. Several attempts failed, and she had to watch as beautiful, intelligent beings died despite her best efforts. "We're losing too many," she told Rivera after a particularly difficult day. "The stress of evacuation is making hibernation more dangerous. Their bodies can't handle the shock." "Keep trying," Rivera replied. "Every life we save is a victory." Luminarch Aaron was among the first to undergo hibernation, insisting that the leaders should not ask others to take risks they would not take themselves. His final words before entering the pod were a message for humanity. "Whatever happens to us," he said, his patterns glowing softly in the underwater chamber, "remember that you gave us hope when no one else would. You showed us that goodness still exists in the galaxy. That alone makes our lives worthwhile." As more and more Kithara entered hibernation, the human ships began to resemble floating graveyards. Thousands of pods filled every available space, their occupants floating in peaceful sleep while life support systems hummed quietly around them. The ships moved slowly and carefully, unable to risk the acceleration that might damage the delicate hibernation equipment. Time was running out. The solar flares were getting stronger and more frequent. The last Kithara population centers were being evacuated as the oceans finally began to boil away completely. Human crews worked in environmental suits as the planet's surface became too hot and radioactive for normal protection. With 1 week left before Aquatica Prime became uninhabitable, the last Kithara entered hibernation. Chief Bradley performed a final check of all systems as the human fleet prepared to leave the dying world behind. "Status report," Rivera requested. "All 50 million pods are operational," Bradley announced, exhaustion clear in his voice. "Life support is stable. Hibernation cycles are maintaining normal parameters. We did it, Captain. Every single Kithara is alive and sleeping safely." Rivera looked out at the planet that had once been beautiful and was now a hellscape of steam and radiation. "Then let's get them home." The journey ahead would take months, maybe a year. The human ships were barely functional, overloaded with hibernation pods and running on emergency power. They had no weapons, minimal shields, and crews pushed beyond the breaking point. But every single Kithara was alive. As the fleet began its slow departure from the Aquatica system, long-range sensors detected other ships at the edge of scanner range. The Zorani were watching, waiting to see if the human plan would actually work. Other species were positioned throughout the local systems, some hoping for failure, others beginning to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. "Sir," Lieutenant Torres reported from the communications station, We're receiving signals from several independent traders and a few planetary governments. They're offering supplies. The human fleet crawled through space like wounded animals. 3 months into their journey from Aquatica Prime, the ships were falling apart, piece by piece. What had once been proud vessels of exploration and defense were now floating life support systems. Every gram of cargo space filled with hibernation pods containing sleeping Kythera. Captain Rivera stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, watching damage reports scroll across his displays. The news was never good these days. "Captain," Chief Bradley reported, his voice tired and strained, "we've lost another fusion reactor on the Determination. They're running on backup power only, and the Unity is reporting critical failures in their water recycling systems." "How long can they maintain hibernation support?" Rivera asked. "Maybe 2 weeks on the Determination. The Unity, maybe less." Rivera closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. Every day brought new crises, new failures, new impossible decisions. They had saved 50 million Kythera, but keeping them alive was proving even harder than rescuing them had been. "Transfer half the Determination's pods to other ships," he ordered. "Distribute the load across the fleet." "Sir, the other ships are already beyond safe capacity. If we pack more pods into them, we'll find a way to make it work." "We always do." That had become the motto of the fleet. They always found a way. When the food recycling systems failed, they rationed their meals down to starvation levels. When life support equipment broke down, they cannibalized parts from one ship to keep others running. When crew members collapsed from exhaustion, others worked double shifts to cover for them. Dr. Vasquez spent her days moving from ship to ship, checking on the hibernation systems and the health of the sleeping Kythera. The constant stress was taking its toll on everyone, but she never complained, never suggested they give up. "How are they doing?" Sarah asked as the doctor finished her daily rounds. "Better than we are," Vasquez replied with a tired smile. "The hibernation is working perfectly. Brain activity is minimal, life signs are stable. As long as we can keep the pods operational, they'll survive. And if we can't?" Vasquez didn't answer. They both knew what would happen if the hibernation systems failed. The fleet had been traveling for 6 months when they encountered their first major external threat. Long-range sensors detected a group of ships approaching from the direction of hegemony space. The vessels were unmarked, but their profiles matched known pirate configurations. "Captain," Lieutenant Torres called from the communication station, "the approaching ships are hailing us. They're demanding we prepare for boarding and inspection." Rivera's jaw tightened. The human fleet was defenseless, carrying precious cargo through dangerous space. They were exactly the kind of target pirates love to find. "How many ships?" he asked. 12 vessels, all armed. They have us outnumbered and outgunned. Can we outrun them?" Chief Bradley shook his head. "Not with our current engine status. Half our ships can barely maintain cruising speed." Rivera stared at the tactical display, his mind racing through options. They could surrender and hope the pirates would be satisfied with whatever cargo humans had left. They could try to negotiate, offer something valuable in exchange for safe passage, or they could fight. "All ships, this is Captain Rivera," he broadcast on the fleet communication channel. "We are about to be attacked by pirate vessels. Prepare for combat." "Sir," Torres protested, "we stripped all our weapon systems. We have nothing to fight with. We have mass, Lieutenant, and we have determination. Signal the fleet. Ramming. Speed." What happened next became legend in the annals of space combat. 12 well-armed pirate vessels faced off against 200 unarmed human ships carrying 50 million sleeping refugees. The pirates expected easy prey. They found something else entirely. The humans came at them like ancient warriors, using their ships as weapons. The cargo hauler Defiance rammed the pirate flagship, both vessels exploding in a brilliant flash. The transport Courage disabled 2 attackers by using her hull as a battering ram before her engines finally failed. Captain Williams of the Unity sacrificed his ship to protect a group of smaller vessels carrying medical supplies. Captain Chen of the Determination used her failing fusion reactor as a bomb, taking out 3 pirate ships in the explosion that ended her life and the lives of her crew. When the battle was over, 6 human ships had been destroyed and hundreds of crew members were dead, but the pirates were gone. driven off by an enemy that fought like cornered animals protecting their young. Status report, Rivera requested, his voice heavy with grief. We lost 6 ships and their entire crews, Sarah reported, tears streaming down her face. But all their hibernation pods were transferred to other vessels before the engagement. Not a single Kithara was harmed. Rivera nodded slowly. 6 ships and their crews had died to protect aliens they had never met, sleeping beings who would never know their names or their sacrifice. Log it in the record, he ordered. Heroes all. The attack had cost them dearly, but it also sent a message throughout the galaxy. The humans were not going to abandon their mission, no matter what the cost. They would fight anyone who tried to harm the Kithara, even with their bare hands if necessary. Word of the battle spread quickly. Independent traders began reporting the location of known pirate fleets to the human ships. A few brave captains even offered escort services, though Rivera politely declined, but not all the attention was welcome. Captain, Torres reported 3 weeks after the pirate attack. We're being hailed by a Zorani battle group. Admiral Cross is requesting permission to board. Rivera's expression darkened. The Zorani had made their opinion of the mission very clear back at the council meeting. What did they want now? Permission denied, he replied. We're in international space. They have no authority here. Sir, they're not taking no for an answer. They're moving to intercept. The Zorani battle group consisted of 5 massive warships, each one capable of destroying the entire human fleet. When Admiral Cross came aboard the Perseverance, he brought a full honor guard of armored warriors, their weapons prominently displayed. Captain Rivera, the reptilian admiral said, his cold eyes surveying the cramped, jury-rigged bridge. I must admit, my species has been watching your progress with great interest. I'm sure you have, Rivera replied coldly. Are you here to gloat about our losses? Actually, no. I am here to make an offer. That surprised Rivera. What kind of offer? The Zorani Empire will take responsibility for the Kithara hibernation pods. We have proper transport vessels that can carry them safely. In exchange, we will allow your crews to return home with their lives. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes flashing with anger. You want to take credit for our rescue mission? Admiral Cross turned his attention to her. Young human, you have already accomplished the impossible. You saved 50 million lives that everyone else had written off. But now you are risking those same lives through your inadequate equipment and failing ships. Let us complete the mission properly. And what happens to the Kithara once they're in your custody? Rivera asked. They will be resettled on appropriate worlds within Zorani space. They will be well cared for. As slaves, Cross's reptilian features showed what might have been amusement. As useful citizens, the Kithara have valuable medical knowledge. Under Zorani protection, they will contribute to the greater good of the galaxy. Under Zorani control, you mean? Does it matter? They will be alive and safe. Isn't that what you wanted? Rivera was quiet for a long moment, staring at the alien admiral. The offer was tempting. His ships were dying, his crews were exhausted, and keeping the Kithara alive for several more months might be impossible. But he remembered Luminarch Aaron's final words, the trust in the old alien's glowing patterns as he entered hibernation. The Kithara had not asked to be saved, only to become property of the Zorani Empire. No deal, Rivera said finally. Admiral Cross looked genuinely surprised. Captain, be reasonable. Your ships are failing. Your crew is dying. You cannot possibly complete this mission on your own. Watch us. The Zorani admiral studied Rivera for several moments, then turned his attention to the hibernation pods visible through the bridge viewports. Thousands of sleeping Kithara floated peacefully in their artificial wombs, unaware of the conversation that would determine their fate. You humans truly are insane, Cross said finally. You would rather fail gloriously than succeed with help. We'd rather succeed on our own terms than let you turn the Kithara into your property. Very well, but when your ships break down and your refugees die in the cold of space, remember that you chose this outcome. After the Zorani left, Sarah approached Rivera privately. "Captain, maybe we should have considered their offer. If our ships fail, then we fail trying to do the right thing," Rivera replied. "The Kithara didn't ask to be rescued just so they could become someone else's subjects. They deserve freedom, not a different kind of cage, even if it costs their lives." Rivera looked out at the stars, thinking of all the crew members they had already lost, all the sacrifices made to get this far. "Sarah, what's the point of saving someone's life if you destroy everything that makes that life worth living? The Kithara are peaceful, artistic, gentle beings. Under Zorani rule, they'd become something else. Maybe they'd be alive, but they wouldn't be Kithara anymore." The journey continued. Systems failed daily now. Patched together with Spone Year and 3 days after leaving the dying world of Aquatica Prime, the battered human fleet finally reached Haven Prime. The water world sat in the outer reaches of human space, chosen specifically for its deep oceans and stable climate. It was not a perfect match for Kithara needs, but it was home. Captain Rivera stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, looking down at the blue-green planet that would become the new Kithara homeworld. His reflection in the viewport showed a man aged far beyond his years, gray hair turned white from stress, lines carved deep by months of impossible decisions and terrible losses. "Beginning orbital insertion," reported Lieutenant Torres, one of the few original bridge crew still standing. So many had died or collapsed during the journey that most positions were now filled by junior officers who had never expected such responsibility. "Status of the hibernation pods?" Rivera asked. Dr. Vasquez consulted her displays, her own face showing the strain of a year spent keeping 50 million beings alive with failing equipment. "All pods still operational. Life signs remain stable. The Kithara are ready for awakening procedures." "Then let's bring them home." The awakening process was as delicate as putting them to sleep had been. Each Kithara had to be carefully brought out of hibernation, their body chemistry gradually adjusted back to normal levels. It took hours for each individual, and any mistake could be fatal after so many months in suspended animation. But slowly, beautifully, the Kithara began to wake up. Luminarch Aaron was among the first to open his eyes in the aquatic chamber aboard the Perseverance. His bioluminescent patterns flickered weakly at first, then grew stronger as his systems came back online. When he saw Sarah Chen waiting beside his pod, his patterns shifted to colors she had learned indicated joy and gratitude. "The humans," he whispered through the translation device. "You kept your promise." "Welcome to Haven Prime," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "Your new home." The Luminarch's patterns shifted to questioning colors. "All of us? All 50 million? Every single one. We lost a lot of human lives getting you here, but we didn't lose a single Kithara." The ancient alien's patterns went through a complex sequence that the translator couldn't interpret, but Sarah didn't need words to understand the emotion behind them. Over the following weeks, the Kithara gradually took their first looks at their new world. Haven Prime's oceans were different from Aquatica Prime, cooler, with different mineral content, populated by strange new life forms. But they were vast and clean and safe, and that was enough. Chief Engineer Bradley, despite his exhaustion, threw himself into the task of building temporary shelters for 50 million aquatic beings. Human construction teams worked around the idea clock to create underwater habitats using prefabricated components brought from Earth combined with materials mined from Haven Prime's ocean floor. "It's not going to be easy," he told Rivera during one of their planning sessions. "We need to build an entire civilization from scratch, designed for beings who live underwater. We're talking about cities, transportation networks, food production systems, everything." "Then we better get started," Rivera replied. The work was enormous, but this time the humans were not alone. The Kithara, as they recovered from their long sleep, began to contribute their own expertise. Their understanding of aquatic engineering was far advanced beyond human knowledge, and they showed the construction teams how to work with living coral to create structures that would grow and adapt over time. More importantly, they began to share their medical knowledge. Dr. Vasquez worked closely with Kythera physicians to understand their biological innovations. What she learned revolutionized human medicine almost overnight. The compounds naturally produced by Kythera bodies could indeed cure cancer, heart disease, and dozens of other conditions that had plagued humanity for centuries. But the Kythera freely shared this knowledge, asking for nothing in return except the chance to continue their peaceful existence. Why? Vasquez asked healer Tima, one of the senior Kythera medical experts. This knowledge could make you incredibly wealthy and powerful. You could demand anything from any species in the galaxy. The Kythera's pattern shifted to what the translator interpreted as gentle amusement. Wealth and power are meaningless concepts to us. Knowledge exists to be shared. Healing exists to be given freely. This is what your species understood when you saved us, that some things have value beyond profit. Word of the Kythera medical breakthroughs spread throughout human space like wildfire. Diseases that had killed millions were suddenly curable. Human life expectancy increased by decades almost overnight. The economic and social impact was enormous, but the Kythera refused to limit their knowledge to humanity alone. Despite being abandoned by every other species in the galaxy, they insisted that their medical advances be made available to all intelligent life. Suffering is suffering, Luminarch Aaron explained to Rivera. It does not matter what species experiences it. If we can ease pain, we must do so. Even for the species that left you to die, the Luminarch's patterns shifted thoughtfully. Especially for them. Perhaps they will learn from your example. 5 years after the establishment of New Kythera, as the underwater cities of Haven Prime had come to be known, the galaxy faced a crisis that would test everything they had learned. A plague broke out in Zorani space, a virulent disease that attacked the respiratory systems of reptilian species. It spread quickly through their empire, killing millions and threatening to destroy their entire civilization. Traditional medicine was useless against it. Admiral Cross, the same alien who had mocked human compassion and later tried to steal credit for the Kythera rescue, found himself dying from the very disease his people could not cure. From his bed in the Zorani Imperial Hospital, he sent a message to Captain Rivera, now Admiral Rivera, of the Human Kythera Alliance. Admiral Rivera, the once proud Zorani leader, gasped, his voice weak and strained. I am dying. My people are dying. We have tried everything, consulted every expert, spent every resource. Nothing works. I am asking for your help. Rivera studied the alien who had once called humanity weak and sentimental. Cross looked terrible, his reptilian skin gray and scaled, his breathing labored. The proud warrior had been reduced to begging for aid from the species he had despised. What would you have us do? Rivera asked. The Kythera medical advances. We know they exist. We know they have cured diseases thought incurable. Please. We are willing to pay any price. Meet any demand. Rivera was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he turned to Luminarch Aaron, who had been listening to the conversation from his aquatic chamber. Luminarch, it's your decision. These are the people who abandoned your species when you needed help. The ancient Kythera's patterns flickered through complex sequences as he considered. When he finally spoke, his words were soft but firm. Send them the cure. Send medical teams. Save as many as we can. Sir, Sarah Chen protested, they left 50 million of your people to die. Why should we help them? Because, the Luminarch replied, that is what you taught us when you saved us, that the measure of a civilization is not in how it treats its friends, but in how it treats those who cannot help them in return. The Zorani are sick and dying. That is enough. The human Kythera medical mission to Zorani space was led by Dr. Vasquez, now in her 70s but still passionate about healing. She brought with her teams of human doctors and Kythera healers, along with enough medicine to treat the entire Zorani empire. They asked for no payment, demanded no concessions, required no treaties or agreements. They simply worked to save lives, just as they had saved lives on Aquatica Prime years before. The cure worked perfectly. Within months, The plague was eliminated, and the Zorani Empire was saved. Millions of lives were preserved through the freely given knowledge of a species they had once written off as worthless. Admiral Cross recovered completely, his health restored by beings he had condemned to death. When Dr. Vasquez visited him in the hospital as he prepared to be discharged, he could barely meet her eyes. "Why?" he asked finally. "After everything we said, everything we did, why did you save us?" "Because that's what friends do," Vasquez replied simply. "And maybe someday you'll be the ones to help when someone else is in trouble." The impact of the Zorani plague cure echoed throughout the galaxy. Species that had mocked human compassion began to reassess their positions. Governments that had refused to help with the Kythera evacuation quietly began providing humanitarian aid to other crisis situations. The hegemony, which had calculated the Kythera as economically worthless, established refugee assistance programs. The Crystalline Collective began sharing their advanced technology with less developed species. Even the ancient Valdorians, who had ruled the galaxy for millennia through cold logic, began incorporating compassion into their decision-making processes. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. 10 years after the Kythera rescue, Admiral Rivera Sainty